We're really pleased with the participation. There's really good participation today with representatives from around 31 countries when we last counted. So really pleased about that. Welcome everyone. Before we start, I would like to thank our partners and funders who have made this initiative possible. So the European Union, CARIForum, OACPS, and our implementing partner, CARDI. And hello, Barton Clark, who's here with us today. So our two presenters today are coming from Jamaica, Dr. Wayne Myrie from Coconut Industry Board, and Dr. Pons Batugal from the International Coconut Community in the Philippines. Before we start looking at these sessions, we'd just like to do a quick poll to see who's in the audience, from what sectors you're coming from. So you should see on your screens now the poll called Audience Representation. And if you could just tick which group you represent. So if you're representing the farmer or producer community, if you're an entrepreneur or agri-processor, if you're a professional providing services to the industry, or a policymaker. I'll just give you a few minutes to complete the poll. We always do this at the beginning of our sessions just so that we know who we're talking to and we can better tailor the content. So presenting first is going to be Dr. Wayne Myrie from Coconut Industry Board in Jamaica. Wayne is a trusted Alliances for Action partner, and he's advised us many times on sustainable coconut production, particularly in the Caribbean region. Wayne is going to give us a presentation on sustainable coconut production and intercropping. And I know this is a subject that many of you have asked us to cover in our webinars, so I think we're all looking forward to it. Wayne, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Moderator. All protocols observed. Good morning from the beautiful island of Jamaica. In whichever time zone you are, please accept kindness greetings sincerely. The topic of my presentation to you this morning is the production of coconut palms and how it is done in a sustainable way. The content of my presentation is as follows. Importance of coconuts, inflorescence, the beginning of production, production of seedlings, how to plant and spacing, characteristics of varieties and hybrids, intercropping and fertilization, pests and diseases, coconut is important to millions of people around the world, especially those living in tropical countries who depend on the production of coconut for livelihoods. To the Christian, Christ is the most important figure, and the kingdom of heaven is thy kingdom to come. The kingdom of coconut is here on earth. Yes, figuratively and literally. The coconut religion is a Vietnamese religious sect in southern Vietnam, founded in 1963 by Monk Nam. Believers created the coconut kingdom on the islet of Mekong River. The religion is largely based on Buddhist and Christian beliefs. To the Caribbean people, coconut is essential for food and aesthetically important to the tourism product of white sand beaches observed white light reflected blue seas, and yes, coconut palms directly in the landscape. If you want to enhance the movement, the rhythm, the sound of coconut palms, then I would advise you to listen to the very good song of Harry Belafonte, Coconut Woman. Coconut is a monocot, sole species in the genus Cocos. Subfamily Cococtiae, a diploid with 32 chromosomes, has a slender stem trunk. Trunk terminates in a crown of leaves, about 200 to 250 leaflets. No autocambium, so it cannot repair damages done to it, and it's monoecious. It has 18,000 vascular bundles in it. Benefits for the coconut industry from coconut palms are numerous, but I just name here a few to encapsulate its importance. Food source, employment and recreation, landscape, downstream products, biodiversity, soil conservation. The production of coconut begins with the inflorescences. If you look on your left, you will see the spade. That green thing that is protruding is called a spade. It is found in the axil of each leaf, and there's a reason for that. When it is produced into fruits, the fruits are heavy, so the leaf axil is there to support the fruit. The picture in the middle has female and male flowers. The female flower is the bulb that you see there, and the male flower is this small sac on top. As I said, the palm is monoecious. That is, the inflorescence carries both male and female flowers. The male flowers are more numerous than the female flowers, and you have a male phase of during pollination and a female phase during pollination. During the male phase, the pollen sac opens up and exude pollen so that it can be pollinated by the bee on your left. And you have varying degrees of time frame in which this to take place. Continue. The production cycle, of course, from inflorescent to fruit, and the fruit is dried, and then you have the production of seedlings, and you plant the seedlings and you get the big tree. I'll first demonstrate, if you can see here, this is a nut, all right? I actually take out a piece of it so I can explain it to you properly. Here is the exocarp. It's called the exocarp. Here is the mesocarp, and here is the endocarp. On this one, you have, when you remove the shell, which is the endocarp, you have the tester. And inside you have the endosperm. This is a solid endosperm. And in the solid, in the solid endosperm, you have the liquid endosperm. Right? This is the coconut water. Could you continue, please? So what you're seeing here on your screen is the production of seedlings to be transplanted into farmers' field. At first, the seed nuts are set in the nursery, the dry nuts are set in the nursery, and then it is transported from the nursery to the fields after 3 to 4 weeks, and you have 3 leaflets. Continue. Transplanting of seedlings Great care is required to lift the seedlings from the bed. A spade is often used so that it does not damage the shoots. Seedling should be planted immediately after it is lifted from the bed or maximum 2 days after. Transplanting is best done when the seedlings are young and not older so that they can recover quickly from the shock in the field. And it is best to do it in the onset of the rainy season. How to plant coconut seedlings. The subsoil and the topsoil should be placed differently when you're digging the holes. At first, the hole should be dug at 12 inches in depth, 18 inches wide. You take the topsoil and place it to one side, and the subsoil place it to the other side. The topsoil is going to be placed at the bottom of the hole. So the nut is going to be rested on the topsoil. And the reason for that is that the topsoil has the humus content in it and is rich in nutrients, while the subsoil is placed for anchoring purposes around the nut. Continue. Spacing. Depending on the varieties that you're planting, the space can vary. The space is about 9 meter by 9 meter. If you're doing a triangular spacing, if you're doing a square spacing, it's 7.8 meters to 4.5 meters. Continue. Coconut nutrition is important. Many persons plant coconuts and just walk away and leave them and feel that the coconut can fend for themselves. Yes, to some degree, in the first 6 months, that is the case, because the endosperm and the solid and the liquid endosperm will support the nut as an egg would support a chicken, which is about 3 days old. But nitrogen and potassium is important and should be given. In Jamaica, we have a formulation of 12-4-28. Of course, the 12 is the nitrogen, 4 is the phosphorus, and 28 is the potassium. And we give fertilizer based on the age of the plant. In year 1, 0.5 kilograms, which is about 1 pound. In the second year, 1 kilogram, which is 2 pounds. In third year, 1.5 kilograms, 3 pounds. Fourth year, 2 kilograms, 4 pounds. Of course, other nutrients are required, such as your calcium, sulfur, magnesium, boron, and of course, you know, the microelements, other microelements are also important. Continue. And here, I think Pons will give fertilization in better details. The varieties. How do we characterize varieties? The varieties is simply characterized in 2 groups, tall and dwarfs. That's the varieties. But you also have hybrids, which is crosses. And you have distinct characteristics of each of the variety. For example, pigmentation of the nuts and petiole of the leaves. In the tall, most are mixtures of green and brown. In the dwarf, either pure green or brown, yellow, or red. The height increment in the tall is greater than 50 centimeter. For the dwarf, it's less than 50 centimeter. The years of production is also different. For the talls, it starts bearing at about 5 to 7 years. For the dwarf, you can get anywhere between 2.5 years, 3 years. For the hybrid, it's about 4 years. The mode of pollination is also important. In the tall, it's highly crossed. In the dwarf, it's highly self. Continue, please. Hybrids. Hybrids are actually crosses, and you can have tall and dwarf crosses, tall and tall crosses, and it produces for you an hybrid. Now, I should also say that the dwarf is considered to be a mutant of the tall. And not because it is dwarf doesn't mean that it remains dwarf. It only grows very slowly. so that you'll be able to reap more nuts at a more comfortable place than if it was the tall variety. Continue, please. This is an example of a variety called Brazilian green dwarf. It's considered to be one of the sweetest drinking coconut in the world. The hybrid, continue please, the hybrid that we have produced in Jamaica through the auspices of the plant breeder, Dr. Millicent Wallace, Braypan, which is a cross between Brazilian green dwarf and Panama tall. Continue. And Maybraz, which is a cross between the Malayan dwarf and the Brazilian green. We call it Maybraz. Continue, please.
Okay, so just before, we'll briefly interrupt Wayne's presentation before he addresses the subject of intercropping with a quick poll for everyone. You should see it on your screens now. We'd just like to get an indication of whether you already do intercropping. So which of the below do you integrate in your coconut production? I think in the Caribbean region, intercropping is pretty common. So fruits and vegetables, roots and tubers, livestock or poultry, beekeeping, or maybe you don't intercrop, in which case you can select the last answer. Okay, I see we have around 52% vote, so we'll just leave it for another minute up on the screen before Wayne continues his presentation on the benefits of intercropping. Okay, so fruits and vegetables are the lead answer. And the rest is pretty balanced. Thank you very much. Okay, Wayne.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sarah. Benefits of intercropping: maximization of the use of the land, increased crop yields, reduction of weeds, reduction of pests and diseases, provision of shade and support for other crops, and greater profitability, which is important to our rural coconut farmers. Continue. Intercropping here is shown where coconuts can be intercropped with bananas at different spacing, and you have A, B, and C, D for the different spacing, and how those crops are laid out in a coconut field. Continue. Next. You also have coconuts with cocoa, how it can be laid out. You have single hedge, double hedge, mixed single hedge. Continue. Of course, this is a picture of coconuts with bananas and plantains. This is a picture with coconuts and papaya and sweet pepper. And in fact, this farmer is doing very well because of the diversification under this COVID dispensation. He would not have been able to make payments or meet his expenses if he did not intercrop. Intercrop also with pineapples and papaya, with coconuts and pepper, and intercropping with coconuts, intercrop the coconuts with bananas, plantain, and pumpkins. Continue. Types of intercropping. Of course, it's mixed cropping, multiple cropping. You have sequential cropping, but the mixed intercropping growing two or more crops simultaneously with no distinct row arrangement. Row intercropping, growing two or more crops simultaneously with one or more crops. that are planted in rows, strip intercropping, growing 2 or more crops simultaneously in different strips, relay intercropping, growing 2 or more crops simultaneously during part of the life cycle. Continue, please. With everything that you are doing, there is the negative on the positive. And so with the intercropping, you have negative effects as well. The disadvantages of multi-cropping system: competition between plants for light, competition between plants for soil nutrients, competition between plants for water, possibility of allelopathic influences, harvesting of one crop component may cause damage to the other, and sometimes it is difficult to incorporate a fallow period, a rest period for the soil. Continue. The production of coconuts in Jamaica are generally affected by several factors, and our production varies from 172 million nuts to 98 million nuts, back up to 130 million nuts. The trough and peaks that you see in this graph, the trough is of 88, suggests that we have a major disease that affects the production of coconuts. The trough of 70.8 million nuts suggests it is actually when we had the Hurricane Gilbert that affected us in 1988. Continue, please. Issues in the coconut industry. And I should say before I move on to the issues, the world production of coconuts is about 62 billion nuts, and that is done by about 93, 95 countries. The number of hectares is about 13 million hectares. Issues in the coconut industry: pests and diseases, high cost of inputs, insufficiency of planting material, predial larceny, low germination rate, and production of disease-resistant material. Continue, please. The pest challenges that we have in the industry, especially in Jamaica: the lethal yellowing disease, bud rot disease, leaf spot disease, anthracnose, dieback gall mites, red palm mites, ambrosia beetle. Continue, please. Other pests that we find in the region: coconut caterpillar, coconut moth borer, coconut beetle, that's the rhinoceros beetle, red ring disease, citrus wilt or heart rot, and gummosis or stem bleeding. The lethal yellowing disease, which is the most devastating disease that affects coconut palms in the world, began here in 1884 and affected our coconut growing regions later on in the 1960s, in the 70s, where we lost up to 7 million Jamaica talls, the variety at the time. And here I will pause to say that the varieties generally are named from the region in which they are found. So you have the Jamaica tall found in Jamaica, you have the Atlantic tall found in the Atlantic coast, you have the Pacific tall found in the Pacific coast. Continue, please. The symptoms of the lethal yellowing disease: premature nut fall, necrosis of the inflorescences, yellowing of the leaves, and the final stage is a telephone pole when the canopy has fallen off the tree. Continue. What is the cause of the lethal yellowing disease? It is caused by a bacteria called phytoplasma. Now I won't get into the very technical part of it, but it lives in the phloem of the coconut palm, and the phloem is the liquid sap that moves nutrients through the plant. Continue. It is said to be transmitted by vectors: plant hopper, Plexus crudus, formerly known as Mindus crudus. Continue. And recently we found a new potential vector, I discovered this vector at Spring Garden, and I named it Ocleus maca springi. Maca from Patwa meaning thorn, and springy from Spring Garden, where the insect was found. And we characterizes the insect using different genes, 18S rRNA gene, COI gene, and we also found in some of the insects lethal yellow and phytoplasma. This information was published in Zootaxa earlier this year. Continue. The diagnostic methodologies for LY phytoplasma is you first identify the tree that is affected by the disease. You take a sample using a brace and bit. You do a DNA extraction, Dole and Dole, 1990. Then you look at the various regions using PCR polymerase chain reaction, 16S rRNA gene, GREL gene, etc. You do an RFLP, which is restriction fragment length polymorphism. You also send off the amplicant that you get in your PCR for sequencing, and the sequencing data is blasted, and you do your comparison to see what type of phytoplasma you do have. Continue. And of course, we also use now in recent times the real-time PCR, which is far more sensitive than the conventional PCRs. Continue. For the insect, we collect the insect in the field. We do a morphological observation using a microscope. After we do DNA extraction on the insect, we can take the salivary gland, or we can do a whole body extraction using a QIAGEN kit. Then we use various primers, and of course we characterize, and we can also look at phytoplasma to see if it is in the insect. Continue. The management of the disease we have experimented with in Jamaica, and we found that when a disease is managed properly, using surveillance, meaning monitoring, elimination of symptomatic palms immediately, replanting exercises, weeding and vector control, and we manage the health of the palms through nutrition, we can have that picture on your left with healthy trees. But if the farmers do nothing, then you have the picture on your right with the trees dying from the disease. Continue. So we have a motto: we can save coconut trees together. And to coconut growers, we say, you are here to help us save the coconut trees. Continue. And that is the picture that I showed before. And on this property, the disease was founded in the disease was discovered, sorry, in 1999. When the disease was discovered, he had 70,000, 80,000 trees, 700 acres. Today, he still have 80,000 trees, 7,000 trees, simply because of the practices that we have implemented. He has lost 1.5% of his population. Continue. So, moderator. Coconut tree implement climbing device was used here in Jamaica, and the gentleman on your left came here from India, showed us how to use the device to climb coconut trees so that harvesting can be conducted easily. And the picture on your right, it is yours truly going up the coconut tree to demonstrate to our farmers how easy this implement can be used. I am happy to say that so far, many of our farmers have used the implement, and recently we have ordered another 100 from India, and they have arrived, and we have them here to be distributed to our farmers. Continue. Thank you very much for your attention. When the President of the United States was here, he asked and requested a jelly coconut. The jelly coconut is the green coconut that is best for drinking. So he's actually drinking a Maypan, which is a cross between a Panama, which is a cross between the Malayan dwarf and a Panama tall. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for the detailed presentation. I especially, the last slide on the coconut tree climber is pretty impressive. I've seen it. I don't know if anyone else has, but I've seen it in a video, and it's a really impressive contraption and really useful. If anyone has any questions for Wayne, this is your opportunity. We can have a short question and answer session. If you have any questions on sustainable coconut production, on intercropping, pests and disease, or anything. I did see a question in the chat from Pam Santos. What would be the criteria to choose an intercrop plant? Wayne, would you like to address?
Yes. Well, the criteria would be you choose a plant that might not necessarily be a permanent crop, right? Because you want to maximize the usage of your field, but you also want to get an income before the coconut starts to bear. Remember that the coconut starts bearing, in the case of the dwarf, 3 years. So in between those years, you need to earn an income. So you choose a crop that would best suit the market that you're going to sell the produce to. So for example, if you know that the markets will take melons, then you would plant melons. If the markets would take cucumber or pumpkin, then you would plant pumpkin between the coconuts. But by all means, we always try, we do intercropping with cocoa, we always try to avoid permanent crops. We try to do cash crops instead of permanent crops, mainly for intercropping.
Thanks, Wayne. We have another question in the chat. Just a quick reminder to everyone that you can also ask us the question. Just raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you have another question. There's a question in the chat from Annalisa Skeet. What varieties of coconuts do you have in Jamaica that is lid resistant?
That is?
LYD.
LYD resistant. We have a special Malayan, we call it the special Malayan dwarf. It's a yellow Malayan dwarf. We did some work with this plant over a number of years, and we find that it is standing up to the disease in the areas that we have exposed it to the disease. And in those areas, it is actually doing very well. We have done this experiment now over the past 15 years. So we know that, of course, it is not 100%. We expect about 5% of the population to die, but so far we have about 95% of the population that remains alive. So we know that it is doing very well.
Thank you. Troy Augustine is raising his hand. Troy, do you want to ask us your question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I saw one of the pests, the Rhynchoporus palmarum. I just wanted to know what method of control have they been using and how effective it has been, because coming from Brazil, I learned a trapping method, and it has been working effectively using a bait that we got from Costa Rica. It's a pheromone actually, and using food source that the beetle can feed in the trap. And I just wanted to know if that technique or that technology is also dispersed throughout the islands and every participant that is on the chat. And if there's a method or means of sharing the knowledge, the technology with them, I would gladly would like to do that. I just wanted to know.
Are you talking about the?
Yes, a little.
Are you talking about the rhinoceros beetle?
No. There are two beetles. The Rhynchoporus palmarum. That's the black one.
Oh, the American palm weaver.
No, the American is the red. It's the black Rhynchoporus South American palm weaver.
The black. Okay, the black one. Okay, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you can use pheromone traps to trap it. I think that's the way you should do it. You should also try and remove the dying or dead debris and palms around, so that your sanitation is important to control the pests. So yes, you're using the right approach.
No, I want to know what type of trapping do you use? Because I think St. Lucia
It's
had
simple.
an issue.
You don't have to use expensive pheromones. You can cut up sugarcane into a dish or plastic container. You bury it, and it will trap the fermentation will attract the beetle, and it will come towards it, and that's how you can catch it as well.
I'm asking because the method that we use is using 5-liter bottle traps or buckets.
Yes.
You use the food source, whether it be pineapple, bananas, or mangoes, or something like that.
Yes.
They would feed on the food source.
Yes.
But also the pheromone that I'm talking about, it's a sex pheromone to attract the male beetles.
Yes.
So that pheromone would attract beetles from like about a mile away. The food source in the trap would allow them to feed in the trap.
Yes.
And by feeding, they also secrete a pheromone. Like same thing happens within the heart of the palm tree, and allow male and female beetles to enter the trap. And by so doing, I've seen even very small larvae that actually grew, that emerged from the from the beetles in the trap for like over a week. So I just wanted to know if that method is also applied, because it's very effective.
Yes, but in Jamaica we don't have that beetle, so we don't use those traps. In other places,
in Jamaica, you don't have a beetle. Okay.
No, we don't have that beetle.
Thank you, Troy, for your question. We have another raised hand, Alpheus Nanton from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Alpheus.
Hi. Concern about the tree climbing machine. I would like to have more knowledge about it, and if you can give me the contact to source them.
Yes, I can share the details via your email address. If you just put it in the chat, we can capture the email address and I'll share the details with you, and also the contacts of the persons who you can get it from in India.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions in the chat. I'll try and go through most of them. Apologies if I can't get through all of them. How does, from Cosmos Joseph, how does mechanical ploughing for intercropping affect coconut production? If we can quickly answer that.
Yes, it affects coconut. It will affect coconut production. You have to be careful where you plow. Remember that coconut trees have adventitious roots, and those roots spread laterally along the ground. You don't want to damage the root tips because that's the absorption area. So plowing between the coconut trees have to be done carefully. And if you're using an implement with a tractor, you have to be careful that you don't damage the roots.
Thank you. Another question from Otis Jeffers. Are there available resources from Jamaica for exporting coconut seedlings to the Caribbean island St. Kitts and Nevis, or from any other reliable sources that you may know?
No, based on the guidelines from FAO, IPBRID, it is not wise to export seedlings. It can only be exported as seed nuts, because seedlings can transfer with it the vectors that transmit lethal yellowing. It can also transmit on the seedlings also red palm mites and other pests that you wouldn't want to get into your country. So the best way of moving planting material is by seed nuts or embryos.
There's another question in the chat from Raymond Trotz. Has any lure been developed for the rhino beetle?
Of any?
Lure, it says.
Lure, yes. Yes, you have lures that was developed for the rhinoceros beetle, but I can share with you a very simple way of controlling the beetle. The beetle moves its head like this when it's moving. So what you need to do around the coconut palm, you mix the soil with sand or you put sand around it. So when the bee could do like this, it picks up the sand in the connective tissue between the neck and the body. And that soft tissue, the sand will just cut the head off, and that beetle is dead. So that's an easy way of controlling the beetle.
Thank you. And I mean, we have a lot of questions here. A lot of them actually have to do with the climate. So I suggest we actually have a Facebook group that we use as a tool for coconut industry stakeholders of the Caribbean. It's called Alliances for Coconut Industry Development in the Caribbean. I think I'll ask someone to share it now in the chat so you can find it. And after this presentation, we can make a post in the Facebook group providing more information on the climate, because I see there are a lot of questions around that. So if you look in the chat now, you'll see the link to that Facebook group. It's a good platform for these kind of questions. Unfortunately, we need to move on now to the next presentation. Thank you, Wayne, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you. And before I introduce our next speaker, we'll just have a quick poll on organic farming and your experience with that. So you should see it up shortly on your screen. So it's about organic production. The question is, why would you go for organic production? So would it be to increase your yield, to arrest yield decline? Would it be for soil nutrition? Would it be to get a premium price, or all of the above? I'll let you complete that. In the meantime, I'll start introducing our next speaker, Dr. Pons Batugal. Pons is coming from the Philippines. He's president of the Farmers Community Development Foundation International, and he's also chairperson of the International Coconut Community Technical Working Group. He's going to make a presentation today on climate smart agriculture and organic farming, and he's going to share experience and best practices from the Philippines, and also I think he has experience in many countries worldwide. I'll let you just complete the poll before I give the floor to Dr. Batugal. I think we have around 52% of votes.
Yes. Good evening here, good afternoon, and good morning. Can I have the first slide, please?
Yes, thank you, Pons. Just bear with us a second. Can you see it?
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Good evening to everyone and to all our coconut friends around the world. The invitation was sent to about 40 country members of the International Coconut Community and the COGENT network. So we expect a lot of them to be listening to your program. I'd like to thank the Alliance for inviting me to make this presentation. And I am presenting on behalf of the International Coconut Community, where I serve as chairman of the Technical Working Group and the Farmers Community Development Foundation International. I have put my email on the screen so that those of you who would like to ask questions after the seminar, you could communicate with me. The two topics assigned to me are climate smart agriculture and organic farming. And I'd like to discuss those in terms of their application to the coconut growing communities of the world. Next, please. The situation is like this. Climate change is the defining issue of our time. Everybody is talking about climate change. And we are at a very defining moment, because if we don't arrest it, we are going to warm the planet, and it's not going to be good for agriculture and for human. This is because climate change is now underway, and it will worsen if it's not effectively addressed. And climate change, as you know, causes warming of the planet, and the higher temperatures would reduce crop yields. So how do you address the problem? Through climate smart agriculture. There are three interventions that are suggested. These are the mitigation intervention, adaptation intervention, and coping intervention, which I'll discuss in detail. But in this presentation, I will concentrate on the interventions related to coconut. The mitigation interventions are meant to develop climate proofing strategies to prevent or reduce the negative economic and environmental impact of climate change. And the mitigation interventions are, we should replant our senile, our aging coconut trees. About 50% of our world coconut are senile with declining yields. And actually, we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. If we don't replant them, we might lose the industry because buyers would shift to more sustainable supply of vegetable oils. The second intervention is to expand coconut plantings in new areas because we are not producing enough coconut for the world. Many processing companies are operating below capacity. And if we don't plant and produce more, we will lose the industry. The third is to conduct agroclimate risk assessment to find out whether or not we are already in danger of climate change, and to develop climate proofing strategies to apply to our coconut growing communities. And the fourth one is to train our officials on climate proofing to help them formulate policies to manage ecosystems in coconut growing communities. These interventions will increase the carbon sink so that it will prevent carbon dioxide and other gases from going into the ozone layer to destroy the ozone layer. Number two, it will lower the temperature of the coconut growing communities and create a favorable microclimate for other crops to grow. And therefore, it will stabilize otherwise fragile monocrop farming system for coconut. The adaptation interventions, there are 7 of them, is to adapt biodiversity and rich coconut farming system to replace our fragile monocrop farming system. This means that we should plant other crops between coconuts so that if we lose our income from coconut due to any calamity, including the disease, we at least have other sources of income. Number two, we should breed for high-yielding and early-bearing coconut varieties so that even with the advent of climate change, we're still receiving higher yields. Number three, we should breed for drought and pest-resistant varieties, especially against the dreaded lethal yellowing disease of coconut that has devastated the Latin America and the Caribbean and African countries. Luckily, we don't have them in Asia yet at that magnitude. And when the temperature of the planet rises, the drought-resistant varieties would be able to survive and produce at least something. Fourth, we should intercrop nitrogen-fixing agroforest species, root crops, and vegetables so that even with the advent of climate change, there's still income to be earned as we will reduce the air temperature at the canopy level. So these are the first four interventions. The next three are water harvesting. We should capture and store the excess water during the rainy season in storage ponds for use as irrigation water during the dry season when our coconuts are sacrificing their yields. Number 6, we should conserve moisture through mulching with the high potash containing coconut husk and coconut fronds, as you will see later in the slide I'll present. Number 7, we should expand the mangrove plantings along the coast to serve as carbon sink and the sanctuary and spawning ground for small fishes and crustaceans, and to protect the coastal community against ocean surge during typhoons and tsunami calamities. During the Typhoon Yolanda in the Philippines, the communities which had mangrove plantings were least damaged. This slide shows how to convert the fragile monocrop farming system into a biodiversity enriched coconut farming system. We call this ridge to reef model. So you plant timber trees on top of the mountain to enhance the watershed below and to serve as a typhoon, as a wind protection, as a windbreak. As you go down the slope, you plant coconut intercrop with the fruit trees. As you go down, you start water harvesting and storing them into ponds to use during the dry season. For the vulnerable farming communities, we have to prepare them for climate change. We conduct a hazard risk assessment. We develop planting calendar so that we plant outside of the risky months. We conduct water harvesting. We produce food in every home. We plant a fruit tree in every home. We produce and use organic fertilizer, and we do massive capacity building. And along the coast, we plant coconut because the coastal areas produce 25% higher yields for coconut compared to the inland. And also we can produce non-timber trees to protect the communities against typhoon. And we should rehabilitate and expand the mangroves because these are the protection against typhoon surge. The next slide, please. Coping intervention. This is usually what is missed in a lot of development efforts. A lot of the development research and development work in climate change are focused on mitigation and adaptation. But what I'm trying to include here is a coping intervention after the calamity that is caused by climate change has occurred. This includes the establishment of food gardens in every home to provide adequate and nutritious food in every coconut farming household after a calamity has occurred. This includes the growing of indigenous native vegetable and root crops in every home, planting a fruit tree or two in every home, raising native chicken, ducks in every home, producing and using organic fertilizer in every home, producing and marketing high-value products from the coconut to generate off-farm income, especially for women, and establish a climate-smart village by integrating all the above interventions. These coping interventions have been very useful after a calamity, but our experience in the Philippines is that it has been also beneficial under normal times. So we call this a no regrets strategy. Next slide, please. Next, please. This is an example of a family taking care of a vegetable garden. These are the families that escaped from the Mayon volcano eruption. In a period of 1 month, they had vegetables to eat. Next slide, please. Next. Example of intercropping coconut with mangosteen, banana, and the next slide shows fruit trees. The next slide, please. Fruit trees like durian and Lancium domesticum, you don't have that in the Caribbean. Next. And raising native chicken, free range native chicken, so that it's affordable. Next. So my next topic is organic farming. Why is organic farming important? Because it can also help moderate climate change. How do you do it and why do we do it? We produce organically grown coconuts because the coconut extracts huge amount of nutrients from the soil, which if it's not replaced, the nutrients will be diminished and this will lead to yield decline. So yield decline plus senility or old age, as I said previously, is a deadly combination for failure in the coconut industry. Most coconut farmers cannot afford to apply expensive chemical fertilizers, and therefore there is another option, go organic farming. And the other benefit is that we will reduce the use of harmful chemicals, expensive fertilizers that will pollute a lot of our waterways. So how do you promote organic farming? We do it by using doable, science-based, affordable, and sustainable coconut organic farming technologies, which I'll describe in the next slides. Yield decline will be arrested or yields will increase, and there is a premium price, I think about 15 to 20% higher price for organic coconuts compared to the normal coconut. Next slide, please. The table shows how much nutrients extracted by the coconut from a 1 hectare area, producing 7,500 nuts per hectare per year. Here in this table, you see that the coconut will extract 160 kilos of urea, 71 kilos of phosphorus, 279 kilos of muriate of potash. This is the most expensive fertilizer, the complete fertilizer, which has NPK. The dolomite, 232 kilos will be extracted from a hectare. So you could see that it is expensive to buy all of those if you want to replace it with expensive chemical fertilizer, which many farmers cannot afford. They can afford to do nothing, and to do almost nothing is to the use of organic farming. What are the components of organic farming in coconuts? Number one is the use of Mucuna bractata, a cover crop that is evergreen. It doesn't dry up even during the summer. And the feature of this cover crop, unlike the other cover crop, is that it can fix from the air into the soil up to 200 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year. It kills all the weeds. I'll show that later. It conserves moisture, makes the soil moist and fertile, prevents soil erosion, and improves the organic matter content of the soil. You need only, I put here 6, but you need only 4 seeds to plant per hectare. It costs 24 US cents and $48 per hectare. The beauty of this is you plant it only once in your life and it will multiply by itself. The second intervention is to apply mycorrhiza fungus, which increases, as you know, the cation exchange capacity of the soil, or the ability of the soil to convert unavailable nutrients into available form, which can now be easily absorbed by the roots. We now have a concoction of 12 mycorrhiza races in one formulation. It costs 20 cents per tree to apply, or $30 per hectare. And the beauty again is you apply it only once in your life and it will multiply by itself. Both are very affordable. Next. Number 3, you apply an organic soil ameliorant called bioiodal. This one contains 14 macro and micronutrients, and it comes from crushed rock under the sea, from the bedrock. As you know, complete fertilizers contains only 3 macronutrients. These are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The bioiodal contains 14. And you apply only 1/2 kilo per tree, costing 16 cents per tree, or $24 per hectare. And you apply it only every 3 years. The fourth intervention is very cheap. It costs almost nothing. You apply coconut coir dust or peat from the coconut husk. You apply it all over the roots around the tree from the husk nuts you harvest every year. And the coconut peat contains up to 8% potassium. As you know, potassium is needed for flowering and fruiting. If you don't have enough potassium, you'll not get high yields. And the coir dust also holds water up to 8 times its volume, so that during the summer, it can provide conserved water to the coconut roots and reduces the pump stress during the dry season. So these are the 4 interventions, and this is how it is applied. You'll see it in the recording so that I don't have to waste my time here. But you put the cover crop in 2 corners, the fungus in 2 corners, the organic fertilizer in 2 corners, and you apply the coir dust around the coconut tree. Okay, next, please. Next, please. This is how the Mucuna bractata looks like. You could see no grass can grow under a cover crop of Mucuna. And the beauty is that it also fixes nitrogen from the air into the soil up to 250 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year. That's perpetual. And you don't have to spend any more after the first minimum application. So in summary, I presented 4 mitigation, 8 adaptation, and 6 coping interventions. So the Alliance for Caribbean Coconut Sector should develop and implement programs incorporating any, or better still, all 18 climate smart agricultural practices. If you could do this, it will transform the marginalized coconut farmers into productive coconut farmers that would lead to a very sustainable coconut industry. At this time, I'd like to invite the Caribbean countries to join the international coconut community so that we could help you more. Anyway, the ICC and FCDF would be ready to share our climate change strategies and experiences in the Asia Pacific. And additionally, I invite you to view from your YouTube a 10-minute video entitled Coconut Farmers Need Not Be Poor. In fact, coconut farmers should be rich. Next, please. Next. This is how high-yielding, early-bearing coconut dwarfs and hybrids look like. And with this, I'd like to end my presentation. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Video in the chat. Is that possible?
YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be useful. You could maybe share the link in the chat, and then our audience can look at it later. Thank you very much. I can see there are some questions already in the chat. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try to address as many as possible. Our first question is from Pam Santos. Do you have a way to evaluate additional carbon sink gained with the interventions?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you have any way to evaluate additional carbon sink gained through the interventions? How can you measure the additional carbon sink gained? Is there a way to evaluate?
Yes, because you could measure that in terms of the number of hectares and the amount of carbon dioxide that a hectare would absorb compared to when you don't have any in open areas. For example, in terms of expanded plantings, you could calculate how much carbon dioxide is absorbed by a coconut, 1 hectare coconut times the number of hectares of new plantings.
Thank you. And now we have another question from Raymond Trotz. Is the 25% higher yields along coastal areas related to salt nutrition? If so, then how best can salt be administered to cultivations which are away from the coast?
Can you repeat the question again, please? Sorry.
Is the 25% higher yields along coastal areas, I think that you mentioned that in your presentation, is this related to salt nutrition? So because there's salt along the coast. If so, then how best can salt be administered to cultivations which are inland, away from the coast?
Yes, yes. Actually, coconut is the only commercial crop that can grow under salty conditions. It's partly because it loves salt. Secondly, the yields along the coast are high because all the water from the mountain go to the sea. And then that means it would have a better water regime. Third, the body of water, the ocean, will buffer abrupt changes in temperature. And therefore, you'll have an evenly distributed temperature, which is good for pollination and fruit set. Those are the main reasons why coconuts along the coast, in the study of the Philippine Coconut Authority, have shown that the yields could increase from 15 to 25% higher compared to the inland yields.
Thank you. There's a question asking about accessing the PowerPoint. Just a quick reminder to everyone that as with each webinar, we will be sharing the content of the presentations either through a mail out or they'll all be accessible on CARDI's website. Maybe someone from CARDI or from ITC can share the link in the chat where we can access the recordings of the webinars and the presentations. Thank you. There was another question earlier. Sorry, there's another question here. Is it feasible to use neem cakes as a nutrition supplement and insecticide for a healthy coconut plant? From Albada Beacom.
There are evidences that neem can be used for organic insecticide, but that has to be quantified.
Thank you. There was a question earlier for Wayne that I didn't have time to go through. Does the hybrid tree produce more oil than the regular tall tree?
The hybrids have an advantage of producing higher yields compared to the traditional tall, but the hybrids also require higher inputs of nutrients. The new development is that hybrids can produce higher virgin coconut oil output compared to the traditional varieties. And it also can have higher levels of medium chain fatty acid, which is the most important component of lauric acid. So there are many characteristics of hybrids and even the traditional varieties. So one of the projects of the International Potato Center, International Coconut Community, and the Cogent Network is to evaluate the germplasm that are conserved in many gene banks around the world to determine their potential for producing high-value products. Because there are many varieties, for example, that have very good production of husk. There are many varieties that are good for production of coconut water, like the Brazilian green dwarf. There are varieties that are good for aromatic coconut water. So there is a potential, but where it is advantageous to hybrid, it may not be advantageous to the tall. And
yes,
each of these have their own advantages.
Thank you. Wayne, did you want to add something? No. We have another question from George Emmanuel. how can sargassum be used as an ameliorant for impoverished soils where coconuts are grown and intercropped?
How do you use?
Sargassum? How can sargassum, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, the nutrient content of sodas has not been adequately evaluated. In fact, it may be a little acidic, but there are treatments to reduce the acidity. But more research should be done to quantify exactly how much nutrient is there in the sodas. For coconut corders, that has been studied.
Thank you. I think we've gone through most of the questions. Just a reminder, once again, you can check the chat for the links to CARDI's coconut website and also to their YouTube channel where we post all the webinar recordings. So they're including the one today, there will be 6 so far. Also, please check the chat for the Alliances for Action Facebook group, which is specifically for the coconut industry in the Caribbean. I see we got 8 new members, so thank you for joining. And we really want to use this as much as possible as an interactive platform for any questions like the ones that you asked today that you might have. And you know, as members, you can also post your own information that you feel is worth sharing or your questions. We really want to use this as a tool. So I encourage you once more to join this group, which could be useful. Thank you very much, Pons, for your participation, for your presentation. I'm sure everyone gained a lot from it today. Thank you very much.
Welcome, thank you.
I'd just like to thank once more all of our partners. First of all, our implementing partner, CARDI, and our partners today for the presentation, Coconut Industry Board and International Coconut Community, and to thank the EU, OACPS and CARIFORUM for supporting us and enabling this webinar series that we're all benefiting from. We're going to have our next webinar next week, webinar 7, which is going to be on finance and investment. So stay tuned for that. As usual, we'll post it on our social media. CARDI will also. And before you go, I'd just like to take up a couple of minutes more of your time for a quick feedback poll. I see you're already completing it. It's up on the screen. Just so that we can have an indication of whether you are satisfied with the content and what you'd like to see in our next series. So this is really to help us improve our content and better tailor it to your needs, because this is our first priority. So thank you very much, everyone. And have a great rest of the day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.